Last time, we followed the trail of a secret American experiment, one that began with the promise to defend freedom and ended with agents dosing hookers, johns, and soldiers with LSD. The scientists called it MK Ultra, a war for the human mind, not fought with bullets, but with belief. They tried to rewrite people through chemicals. But what if there was an easier way? What if the state could program your reality without a syringe, without a pill, using something you already trusted? A preacher's voice, a Bible verse, a magazine on your coffee table? Because the most powerful drug is religion. And the man who mastered that formula was Henry Robinson Luca. Born in China, son of Presbyterian missionaries, raised to save souls, and later to save capitalism itself. His parents were murdered by communist revolutionaries. He returned to America carrying the ghost of that loss, and he built an empire to avenge it. Time magazine, Life magazine, Fortune, and later Sports Illustrated, more than magazines, they were mirrors. They told Americans what was true, what was holy, and who the enemy was. And as Washington learned to weaponize psychology, Henry Luca learned to weaponize faith. If MK Ultra was the science of control, Luca was the sermon. This is Exhibit A, MK Ultra, Part 2, The Empire of the Mind. Henry Robinson Luca was born in 1898 in Qingchao, China, the son of American Presbyterian missionaries. His father, Reverend Henry Winters Luca, believed he was bringing light to the East. But the China he walked into was already burning, torn between warlords and poverty and revolution. To the young Henry, the lesson was simple. Faith was the front line. The Bible wasn't just a book, it was a banner. And those who rejected it were enemies of God and civilization itself. That idea that religion could define loyalty would stay with him forever. By the time he reached Yale, Luca had traded his father's pulpit for a printing press. He wasn't a preacher, he was something new, a missionary of modern media. In 1923, he and Britton Hayden founded Time magazine. Short, punchy, moralistic, it told Americans what mattered and how to feel about it. He called it organized news, but it really was organized belief. Then came Life, Fortune, Sports Illustrated, a publishing empire with more reach than the Church of England. Every word, photograph, and broadcast carried a sermon. Capitalism was divine. America was chosen, and God was on our side. After the war, when the OSS dissolved into the CIA, Luca was already part of the club. He funded missionaries and covert journalists overseas. He mingled with men like Alan Dulles and Frank Westner, architects of psychological warfare. His magazine would do for the CIA what LSD did for Sidney Gottlieb, who was also the CIA. Expanded perception and shape reality. If Moscow had Marx, America had John 3:16, and Luca was its prophet. Last time, we talked about the drugs, the spies, and the men who thought they could hijack the human soul. But before LSD ever hit the bloodstream, before the needles and the mirrors, there was the message. Chemical Control, that was the sequel. Because the first experiment, the one that really worked, was belief. And the most powerful drug is religion. Nowhere is that more obvious than in the story of one man, Henry Robinson Luca, missionary's son, news mogul, the guy who practically wrote the gospel according to Uncle Sam. If America ever had a pope, it wasn't in Rome. It was sitting in a Time Life office, smoking a pipe and calling it journalism. Henry was born 1898. The son of Presbyterian missionaries in China. His parents were murdered by communist revolutionaries. He grew up in the shadow of two empires, one divine, one colonial. Both claimed to bring light to dark corners of the earth. At Yale, he joined Skull and Bones. He wasn't the best writer, but he had vision. What if you could take all sermons, speeches, headlines, and boil them down into one weekly gospel? In 1923, Time magazine was born. News organized like a sermon. If truth was the prophet, bias was the brand. Faith was the first drug. And Chemical Control, that was just the sequel. After the sermons and the headlines, after the magazines and the music, the CIA turned its gaze inward, to the human mind itself. And for that, they needed doctors. Sidney Gottlieb, Dr. Ewan Cameron, men of science, yes, but also architects of the unreal. The OSS had dissolved into the CIA, but the mission remained: control perception, bend reality, create obedience. They weren't just experimenting on the willing. They were experimenting on the unwitting, on the forgotten, on the one society already overlooked. The goal? Behavioral engineering. To rewrite memories, to erase doubts, to program people like the machines. To program people like machines. And in their labs, morality became a variable, manipulated with every pill, every injection, every shock. The methods were brutal, clinical, sometimes insane. LSD on soldiers, prostitutes, and civilians. Sensory deprivation tanks, electroshock therapy on patients who didn't know the word consent. Hospitals became experimental playgrounds. Universities became unwitting collaborators. Military contracts funneled funding and legitimacy. Some subjects never recovered. Memories splintered. Careers ended. Minds broken. The experiments weren't just chemical. They were psychological, social, and moral. Every human being became a test tube. And the world outside, just a lab waiting to be observed. And while the CIA dosed the body, the media dosed the mind. Segment 1 taught us this: belief can be a drug, and MK Ultra was proof that the state could engineer obedience, both chemically and culturally. Magazines, radio, music, sermons, all tools of the same program. The experiment in the lab mirrored the experiment in the living room. One measured synapses, the other measured convictions. The human toll is hard to quantify. Names lost, lives fractured, families destroyed. Some subjects walked into hospitals for a simple checkup and walked out strangers to themselves. One man, after months of sensory deprivation and LSD, could no longer recognize his own reflection. Another woman, a university student, left the lab with her memory of 3 years completely erased. That wasn't horror fiction. That was Monday morning in America. And the doctors, the men who called themselves healers, were writing the instructions. In the 1970s, the CIA officially shuttered MK Ultra. The papers were burned, the records classified, but the lessons lived on. Fear, obedience, and manipulation of perception never truly ended. Media, propaganda, and marketing became the new labs, and America, still the test subject. The doctors and the damage they did were only the beginning. The experiment moved from petri dish to television set, from syringe to sermon, from lab notes to headlines. Next, we uncover the hidden masters of perception, the ones shaping not just what we see, but how we believe. The labs closed. The files were shredded. The experiments officially ended. But the experiment never really stopped. MK Ultra wasn't just a program in a basement lab. It was a proof of concept. The mind could be shaped, directed, even broken, if you knew the rules. And once you knew the rules, why stop at the lab? MK Ultra taught the CIA something fundamental. Suggestion works. Repetition works. Emotional triggers, that works too. And if those tools could work on one mind in a tank, why not millions in a nation? Even the whole world. Enter the public square. Advertising, PR campaigns, magazines, radio, and eventually television. Behaviorists like B.F. Skinner and Edward Bernays weren't soldiers in a chemical war, but they were cousins of the same science: conditioning, messaging, repetition. The principles of control were universal. The syringe was out. The sermon and the headlines, those were in. And then came the CIA's next move, Operation Mockingbird, a program not of drugs, but of information. Journalists, editors, publishers, and networks quietly co-opted. Henry Luca's empire, part of the same ecosystem, same mission, different tools. Headlines replaced injections. Photographs replaced lab notes. The objective was clear: influence perception, shape the narrative, decide what the public should fear, hope for, or believe. The war on minds had left the lab. It had entered every living room in America. Faith, fear, and finance, the triumvirate of control, didn't end with a printed page. Radio preachers doubled as psychological operators. Gospel music became mainstream messaging. Every magazine, every broadcast, every advertisement could reinforce obedience, normalize ideology, or amplify patriotism. The lessons of MK Ultra had left the lab and were now baked into culture itself. Chemical influence was temporary. Cultural influence, that was permanent. And the frontier never stopped expanding. Today, algorithms nudge our attention. Social media shapes our desires. and curated content shapes what we believe. The tools have evolved, but the principle is the same. Predictive behavior. Manipulate perception. Program obedience without a single needle. Needles help too. MK Ultra proved the possibility. Media and culture proved the scalability. And now the experiment runs at speed of light, in every pocket, on every screen, including this one. The mind was never the enemy, only the frontier. And the frontier is still being mapped. Next time, we'll follow the journalists, the editors, the networks, the masters who learn to control not with syringes, but with headlines. The CIA's media machine, Operation Mockingbird. Somewhere in the background, another program quietly imported scientists to keep the experiments going, but that's a story for another day. This has been Exhibit A, MK Ultra, Part 2, and this is Clayton Blackwood, signing off. See you guys and girls next time.